Hi, I'm Eric Green, and we could actually subtitle this program, this edition of Conversations, as The Waiting Game. South Dakotans are awaiting the state Supreme Court decision on recreational marijuana. Will it be legalized? Amendment A, which called for the legalization, was approved in November with 54% of the vote, but a Hughes County judge ruled the amendment unconstitutional, agreeing with a lawsuit that was supported by Governor Noem. The Supreme Court decision, we now know, will not come down before Thursday, July 1st, and quite possibly later. The court's administrator, Greg Satizon, set the record straight in this statement last Thursday. It reads, "The appeal related to Amendment A is under active consideration by the Supreme Court. It can confirm that a decision will not be issued before July 1st. And Satizan continues, until the court issues an opinion, the ruling of the circuit court declaring Amendment A unconstitutional remains in effect." Well, here with us to discuss all of the what-ifs with recreational medical marijuana, also recreational and medical, and which the medical goes on the books this Thursday, the 1st. We have Rapid City State Representative Mike Derby, who helped put together the Cannabis caucuses, which we carried a few months back to get everybody up to date on how this could work. And also with us is Jefferies, who is the owner of Dakota Cannabis Consulting. And we begin. How are you both?
Great, thanks.
Good.
Doing well.
We speculated, which is a dangerous thing to do when we're talking about a court, thought the ruling could come down last Thursday, the 24th. It did not. Now we're hearing no earlier than Thursday, the 1st, but it could very possibly be much later from what you're hearing.
Right. First of all, Eric, I would like to say a big shout out and thank you to Connect Center 1 and KMBN for covering Marijuana 101, 201, 301, and 401 during session. It made a big impact on educating the legislators. Really helped drive the conversation. We got a lot of outstanding information out, and we could not have done that without you. Following up on your comments, what I know about the South Dakota Supreme Court is they do not operate under deadlines. They have their own timeline, and sometimes can be up to a year, I understand. So traditionally, they do their ruling announcements Thursday mornings at 8 o'clock Central Time. We did not get that. Doesn't sound like we'll get it before July 1st. So it could be months. And but that does affect a lot of things, including the interim adult use marijuana committee that I'm on.
Don't use marijuana committee.
No, the adult use.
Oh, the adult use. I said, my ears are getting bad with age. You have to excuse me. The Adult Use Committee. All right. Were you in favor of Amendment A when it first was on the ballot?
Well, that's a great question. I'm on the record. I actually I voted no on both of the initiated Measure 26. I had a lot of concerns in regards to that. I voted no on Amendment A. I felt there were some issues in regards to how it was written and the constitutionality of it, and this is an amendment to the South Dakota State Constitution. It's a big deal. And I felt that there's certain things that probably shouldn't be in there, fees, and I mean, it's hard to change. And so I voted no. I've been very upfront. When I was running, I told people my position. Afterwards, you know what? My vote in my district was even higher than the state average. And so I'm all about supporting the will of the people and where they're at. And I want great rules promulgated, make it safe, and we'll talk more about that. But specifically, I actually did vote against both of them.
Yeah. Kit, is this more, from what you're seeing, more about the actual ballot issue or more about marijuana itself?
I'd say could be a little bit of both. I know that when states...
Governor Noem did say the voters made a bad choice.
And I would take the governor at her word, and at her word where she had spoken the other day about supporting medical marijuana for years.
Right.
So either way, I take the governor at her word, and how we look forward into supporting the will of the people and moving forward in the medical and recreational processes.
Now, we said that you're with Dakota Cannabis Consulting. It's your company. Give us an idea of what your company does.
Absolutely. So we work in a wide variety of different states and license application, build out, engineering. I work with other consultants here in South Dakota to try and build best practices. I was actually a registered lobbyist in the state of South Dakota. I went out there to initially educate and make sure that everyone had a good understanding of what was happening around the country regarding cannabis legalization and the action versus reaction of legislation. And I actually had registered as a lobbyist when the attack on House Bill 1100 came down and it started going after medical marijuana.
What's the biggest misconception people have about Amendment A, would you say, both of you?
Well, I think the biggest thing we have to get the word out is that July 1st, be careful. Things are not in place, and just because it was found unconstitutional at a lower court hearing, it still is. And while we wait, don't do anything stupid is all I can say after July 1st, because it's not legal, and just be patient. We are actually working through the process. I am now on a subcommittee of the Adult Use Marijuana Committee that is actually going to be crafting some legislation. There's 5 of us, Representative Chafee, Representative Bartles, myself, Senator Duhamel, and Senator Rush. And we're not going to slow down. We're going to keep moving forward and actually put some language together.
I want to get back to that in 1 second, but I want to ask you from the private sector, what is the biggest misconception do you think most people have about Amendment A from your travels?
So when you legalize recreational, there are different impacts, whether it's economically or within your communities. And I think people going through this court process, there was challenged constitutionally. But at the end of the day, I do think that we need to look forward to the future, like Mr. Derby had said, and whether it's the legislature coming out in the summer study and crafting that legislation, another ballot initiative, or even the U.S. government coming in and legalizing recreational, I do believe it's inevitable.
All right, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about legislation that's being crafted should this Hughes County Court decision get overturned and it becomes constitutional after all. Back with Mike Derby and Kittredge Jefferies in just a moment. And we are back on the left with Mike Derby, State Rep, District 34 from Rapid City, also Jefferies, who is the owner of Dakota Cannabis Consulting. And again, thank you for being here. Before we took a break, you started to get into legislation that is still being crafted, even though Amendment A remains unconstitutional until the Supreme Court figures out what they're doing.
Yes, Eric, that it may have slowed us down a little because we were waiting for a definitive ruling, and the legislative body does not operate in the world of uncertainty very well at all. So now that we're waiting, there's actually two paths, and Kit can talk about it. One is the proponents could actually do another petition drive to get it on the ballot for next year. That's one path. But literally, that has to be, those number of signatures have to be turned in and approved prior to November 1st, 1 year prior to November 22 election. So that's one path that, I don't know if there's enough time to do that. I think there is, but Kit can probably talk to that. The other path is our summer study session. Our chairman has expressed interest in us putting together some legislation. So you have a dual path whereby maybe we take Amendment A, streamline it, put in a few other things that we're looking at legislatively, a couple other different bills, and bring that forward. I don't know if it would be during a special session, or at least for sure next legislative session. And so then if we pass something that the proponents are comfortable with, that does what they want, legalizes it, moves it forward, and then they have up until 120 days to remove that initiated measure, probably, maybe not a constitutional amendment, off of the ballot. So you can literally run two parallel paths moving forward.
All right, now, is it too soon for you to prepare for the Supreme Court to uphold Hughes County and start a petition? Or is this something you have to wait on?
I've never ran a campaign. I've never done any of those things. I've always seen it from afar, and what an interesting process that is. That'd be a great question for other proponents, but unfortunately I can't answer it. But I would say, to add on to what Mr. Derby had said, was I think there's a third path as well. The next legislative session, there could be other outside interests, whether they're from Colorado or California, who might not necessarily have South Dakota values, trying to push forward an agenda that may not really hold true and resonate with our values in the state.
So if the Supreme Court upholds Hughes County and it remains unconstitutional, you think the next move would be from somewhere, a petition drive that they might try to get finished before November 1st of this year to get it on next November's ballot?
Right.
All right.
Yes.
What states are doing this well?
There's a lot of states, and it kind of depends on how you define well. Colorado.
In your estimation as a consultant.
Yeah, Colorado.
Who's doing it right?
Okay, yeah. Colorado's got a large amount of money that comes back and is appropriated through their general fund. It's over $300 million every year in taxes and license fees that are generated. Oklahoma's got a free market system, so they allow every single small business or capital investor the opportunity to get into the business, and really created a socially equitable program. North Dakota has only 10 licenses at $110,000 licensing fee, so it only allows large capital investors, and 4 of those licenses are owned by the largest cannabis company in the country. So they hold a pretty good-sized market share over the state of North Dakota.
Now, how tough is it to obtain legal cannabis recreational use in these states? Is it a process that people have to register for, or can they just go in like it's a convenience store and, you know,
I would equate
give me
it.
some pot?
I would equate it to similarly obtaining alcohol, but if you combine alcohol and a pharmacy in that sense, a lot of stores have barriers of entry where you have to have an ID check, heavy surveillance system and security cameras to ensure that the person who's working that front desk checks the ID thoroughly, scans it into a point of sale system, and ensuring that that person isn't of underage, but for the most part, it's pretty accessible.
Mike, how would the windfall that would obviously come from legal marijuana affect the state economically?
Well, we did some predictions during the session on what the marketplace would be in South Dakota. And keep in mind, we're a smaller state, and but we're still in that. We had numbers ranging from 350 million a year to 500 million a year in total sales for adult use marijuana. That would be taxable, and we're looking at approximately 15%. So 500 million for easy numbers would be 75 million a year, which would put it about 50 million a year less than video lottery. So it would have an impact, but it's going to take years to move that needle and move till we get that number. And then there's the costs associated on the other side that the Department of Health has to worry about, and so on and so forth.
You know, it's funny when you say it takes years, because I think a lot of people might think, oh, it's legal now, let's all go start smoking pot. And that's not how it works. People who aren't smoking don't have to go get it if it's legal.
If I may touch on that, one of the things that was brought up at the summer study was that cannabis is already here in the state of South Dakota. And the people spoke, and the status quo of having the black market being able to market these products to kids, they don't care. The black market doesn't care what your kid's favorite cartoon character is. They're going to do that. And so having rules and regulations in place and bringing it up, allowing it to be taxed, and bringing forward a new industry, I think is what the people of South Dakota voted for, and establishing a brand new status quo.
Now, last Thursday, the Attorney General, the state's attorney, went in front of the county commission to say it is a violent crime county. Pennington County has a lot of violent crime. A lot of it is due to meth. Even though marijuana is nowhere near meth, what do you think this would do to crime rates if it is legal? Would it help lower crime rates? Because it's marijuana. So I don't know how much of an impact that might really make on a crime rate.
So at the summer study, we've heard arguments on both sides. Some of the studies that I had read that showed that it had reduced violent crime in those communities. And when you make something legal, it would reduce crime in general because you're completely eliminating that from illegality.
Right. You agree?
I would agree with that statement, yes.
Okay. We're going to take a break. When we come back, let's start talking about medical marijuana, things you have seen around the country. I was up in Vermont a few weeks ago where they have it, and the dispensaries are all brightly decorated. And I'll even talk about a family member who's been using medical marijuana, why they use it, and how it's helped them. And we'll continue in just a moment. We've been talking about recreational marijuana, which is not legal in South Dakota, and it won't be legal probably even after the state Supreme Court rules on it, because things have to get put in place.
Correct.
Yes, so but let's talk about medical marijuana, which does go on the books Thursday, July 1st this week. What happens on July 1st, legally, legislatively? It's not like dispensaries are going to pop up overnight.
Well, my world has been primarily focused on adult use, the recreational marijuana side. And so that's the committee I'm on. So Kit will probably be able to talk more about that, but I've been to briefings where the Department of Health is putting together the rules, and Kit can talk about those that just rolled out this
That's
week.
right. Let me show a quote from the Health Secretary, Kim Malmstrom-Risden, and this is what she said last Thursday. The proposed administrative rules are one of many steps our department has taken to develop a safe and responsible medical cannabis program in South Dakota as the voters intended. Again, getting back to the will of the voters. What have you heard about the rules, and explain them to us?
I just want to first off say appreciate Kim Malmstrom-Risden and Justin Williams at the Department of Health and everything they're doing to get this program out in an orderly fashion. They are still draft rules, so I'm going to assume that they're subject to change, so it's hard to
Right, I think
comment
they have
on.
to be enacted by October 29th.
Yep.
And the legislature has to give the okay on those rules before they can be enacted.
Yep, through the Rules and Review Committee, and that was part of
I have to
their-
get the representative up to date on the rules
But
of
that is
the.
the Rules and Review Committee, not
Right.
the full body of the
I
legislature.
get you, okay.
And so the Rules and Review Committee, I believe, meets on September 13th, which is a part of the diagram shown at the summer study on when they were hoping to get a final draft into Rules and Review. But the rest of the timeline, you're absolutely right, is October 29th. Those rules are due. November 18th, patient cards have to be issued. And then according to the 2020 Department of Revenue for Colorado, for their annual report, they had stated it takes about 130 days to cultivate cannabis from seed to sale. So in that estimate, you would expect cannabis to be harvested and ready by about April 1st of next year.
Of next year.
Yep.
People are not allowed to start growing it on July 1st for the purpose of medical marijuana?
So I would suggest consulting an attorney, but the way that I read the rules is that you have an affirmative defense in a court of law for 6 plants minimum under, I believe, Section 52 of 3420G. And then you have an allowable amount of cannabis of 3 ounces, and then products allowed by the department rules.
Tell me about how dispensaries work. Who would get a dispensary? Is it just any business that is interested in doing this? What are the hoops they have to go through?
Man, license application process is not easy. There's a ton of standard operating procedures, security requirements, how you're going to prevent children to coming into the store, how you're going to prove that that patient is a registered card holder. That all goes into your license application. And then with that, stakeholders would be anybody who would be willing to get into the business, and that's kind of what I advocate for. I try to hold those South Dakota values true in that we don't want large corporations coming in and running our state. I'm a firm mom and pop shop. I was a general manager of a mom and pop shop in Oregon, and that's the way I would hope that South Dakota holds those values.
Yes.
Before you move on, could we clarify something that Eric said, or Kit said about 6 plant minimum?
Yep.
There's a 3 plant minimum in there, so maybe that's confusing to some people. You referred to a 6 plant minimum.
So that was a part of codified law, and when I read through the department rules, again, it's a draft. It does say 3 plants minimum or as prescribed by a physician. So there's a wide variety of things that a physician has to do in that why you would need more plants or anything like that, but that petition would have to sign off on you cultivating more.
And this is done like any other prescription?
I believe so.
How was it in Oregon?
So in Oregon, a medical marijuana patient would have to go see a physician, establish a bona fide patient practitioner relationship, and then after that relationship has been established, the physician would issue you a medical marijuana card. That medical marijuana card would be valid for 1 year, and then the rules on how much you could purchase in a day would be up to the department. When at that time, it was substantially more than what South Dakota's is.
How much does it cost to go through the licensing process and actually opening and stocking
For a
a
dispensary,
dispensary?
it's quite a bit of capital investment. You're going to have to do all your build outs. Like again, security systems are not cheap, and not every building that you go out and purchase is fully equipped to sustain that, whether it be safes or other things that you have to establish in there, and then a locked facility. But you could be anywhere from 500,000 plus, depending on what size facility and how big your dispensary is.
Did you notice the people of Oregon, once they had it legal and maybe they were opposed to it at first, come around and say this isn't so bad? Or were they more opposed to it?
I had a landlord that I had lived with while I was in Oregon who supported medical marijuana but didn't support recreational marijuana, and everybody's different, so it just kind of depends.
And we have heard in the news that there are some towns and cities around the state here that want to own and operate their own dispensaries. Good idea?
That's the municipal league has brought that as part of a discussion. For example, there's cities that own their own city liquor store. So is it a good idea? I'm pretty much on the record to say no, it's not a good idea. I would be firmly opposed to municipalities running, owning, controlling dispensaries, either of medical or adult use. There's a lot of hoops that have to jump through. You've got Dillon's rule and you have home rule. And a real synopsis, Dillon's rule, municipalities are creatures of the state. And so they can do what they're allowed to do under state law. Home rule, there's 11 cities in the South Dakota that are under home rule. They can do what is not prohibited by state law. Now,
So if Rapid were to go to home rule,
they could
conceivably
do it.
could own their own.
Correct. But we believe the private sector is going to do this best. This is not for the faint of heart. The medical marijuana is not a proven moneymaker for dispensaries. It's a lot of work, and a lot of them bet for the later date of adult use to be able to convert and sell. Now, in the meantime, it's still illegal on a federal level. So any municipalities that receive federal dollars, until it's legal federally, they can't do it anyway. So I think it's a big uphill battle for.
And it is going to be outlawed on the state university campuses, the public universities. They came out with that last week also because of federal law and that it's not recognized as a legal substance.
Correct. So until that changes, municipalities can't do anything anyway, whether they're home rule or not.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about how medical marijuana is actually distributed when you get the prescription, you go to the dispensary, how that works. And I'll tell you about my daughter's experience with anxiety and medical marijuana, gummies, and vaping, which surprised me when I saw her a few weeks ago. I saw smoke coming out all of a sudden. She goes, "You didn't know I vaped?" No, I didn't, but we'll talk about all of it when we come back. let me tell you about my daughter. She's 26 years old, lives in Chicago, and they do have medical marijuana in Illinois. She has suffered with anxiety a very long time, and it has hurt her sleep, it has hurt her well-being. And then they legalized medical marijuana. And she usually takes a gummy that they have, and she usually takes half a gummy because otherwise she'll get a little loopy. Not to say she has not taken a full gummy before. She is also, which I didn't know, you can vape the marijuana or smoke it, whatever works for you. A lot of cancer patients will smoke it and have smoked it to alleviate the pains of chemotherapy and things like that. It has worked wonderfully for her. She'll be the first one to tell you, and I don't think she minds me telling you about her woes and how the medical marijuana has helped her. What is the distribution process? Now, what she has to do is she goes into one building, she got a prescription, she goes into one building and does the transaction with the prescription. Then and it's all very secure. And then she has to go to another building where she just goes in and they basically, here you go. And I guess that adds an extra level of security. Is that how it works in Oregon? Is that how it works in most states? Would that be how it would work here?
To answer that, yeah, I think that would be pretty similar to how it would work here. Just what I've gathered in other states is that usually when you go into a store, there's a barrier of entry that checks your ID, makes sure that that ID matches the person who's handing it to them. They would scan it into a point of sale system so that it would show on state record that, hey, this person or this patient visited my store. This is what they were looking at. This is the product they were bought, that was purchased, and then they would be on their way. You usually have a high level of security and that they can't get past that barrier of entry until they've proven that they are a medical marijuana card holder or a caregiver.
How is one going to get a medical marijuana card when the time comes? And when does the time come?
So to get a medical marijuana card, you have to meet one of the following qualifying conditions laid out in 3420G, which is now what the Amendment A, or IM26, my apologies. But one of the qualifying conditions, you would have to establish that with your doctor, that doctor would recommend that you use medical cannabis to treat one of those qualifying conditions. After that, you would submit that application to the department, and the department would issue a patient card.
Was there any particular malady that most people in Oregon, when you were managing the dispensary there, were using it for? Or what type of things were they using it for?
Oh man, such a wide variety of different things, whether it was epilepsy or PTSD or arthritis, cancer, nausea, pain. I mean, there was a huge list. And the stories that you experience when you're sitting in the dispensary and you're talking to these people and hearing their personal problems and what they have, and little old ladies that have their hands clumped up from arthritis who use a topical salve. After a couple weeks, you know, they have a little bit more movement in their fingers, and after a couple months, they can pick things up now. And to hold the little old lady crying that says, "Thank you so much for helping us," it is truly heartwarming. Veterans suffering.
You probably heard, veterans, go ahead.
Yeah, veterans suffering from PTSD, having a hard time sleeping at nights, and having hard times just even being able to sit in a room and have conversation, and being able to use cannabis in whatever form they choose, and being able to have a better quality of life. I think that's what medical cannabis is all about.
What type of security measures would you like to see the legislature approve, the committee approve with the rules, and to make sure everything goes smoothly?
Well, security measures, that kind of ties into the two bills I introduced during session. House Bill 1225 and Senate Bill 187. I was prime sponsor on both sides in both houses. And we were following the malt beverage license protocol that's already in codified law. And my position was, why reinvent the wheel? And the reason we went down that is because that allows not only social equity, which you heard that term earlier, which I believe in, which means that small business and entrepreneurs throughout the state of South Dakota should have the opportunity to be in this business. But when you follow that, it's like the ATF model. and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And so you have retailers throughout the state that already sell adult use products. And what do they have to do? They have security, they have product put behind the counter, you have to show IDs, because we don't want to sell to underage people. And so these people already have these retailers have a long history of selling adult use products, and it's already set up. So that was part of the reason I introduced those bills. We want to make sure we create revenue for the state, get rid of the black market, as I said, prohibit underage use, create a distribution network throughout the state of South Dakota so people don't have to drive 200 miles to get product. And really, why reinvent the wheel? The municipalities already issue malt beverage licenses based on location, background. They do background checks, and so on and so forth. So there's different levels of security when you have grow houses where you have hundreds or thousands of plants, to the retail side of it, which is what I'm involved in. And so we're already doing it. Just follow that model.
The cannabis caucuses, people who didn't know a whole lot about cannabis at the time, what do you think they got out of it?
Well, that was a loose affiliation. It wasn't a formal caucus. It was a loose affiliation of House members and senators and lobbyists.
Alliteration. Come on, cannabis caucus.
Hey, and I wish I could, I wish I could claim title to that.
Okay.
But actually, in Congress, they had a cannabis caucus at the U.S. Congress, and so I appropriated that, and it got people's attention. It really did. I think we accomplished quite a bit, actually. The education. Just really moved the needle on that. Obviously, there weren't a lot of bills passed, but a lot of times in the legislature, the first time, good luck getting something through the very first time. And I knew what we were up against, and the governor and their staff were blatantly opposed to my bills and at House State Affairs, and so they both died there. But what it did allow is it put me in a position where I ended up on the Adult Use Marijuana Committee, and now I'm on the committee that's going to be writing legislation. So from that standpoint, I think it accomplished a lot.
And like you say, it's not like marijuana isn't in South Dakota already anyway. So there's more money to be made, I would think, recreational marijuana versus the medical.
Right. Well, medical is limiting to what debilitating conditions are permitted by the department or by rules, and recreational would be anyone 21 and older.
What are the types of forms of medical marijuana that will be available? I mean, you were talking about a salve that can go on the hand. Obviously vaping, obviously gummies. What else is there?
Well, the raw form of cannabis everyone's familiar with, the buds, and then buds and joints would be marijuana. Cigarettes would be pretty common. You'd also see inhalers, suppositories, things you don't normally see on the major media, but all these products.
I've never seen this. I didn't know.
All the product development that's happening within the cannabis realm is absolutely fascinating. Beverages, whether it's like a light soda.
There is a lot of cannabis infused. A lot of beverages right now. So, so there are different forms. It's not like. And then obviously the manager of the dispensary will know a lot. Does a doctor prescribe what type of marijuana? I mean, or what form would work best? Or is that something that somebody can discuss with the person at the dispensary?
Typically, it's what would be somebody that you would discuss with at the dispensary. So the dispensary has a wide variety of different products, and that patient would be able to go in and kind of try out different products that may or may not work for them.
Okay, now, was there recreational marijuana in Oregon as well?
Yep.
And what type of things did you see on that side of things, even though you were running a medical dispensary?
So we were a medical marijuana dispensary that transitioned into the recreational side of things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
were you doing both?
We were doing both.
Can you do both? Will you be able to do both if Amendment A goes forward in South Dakota? Will you be able to have a joint no pun intended, medical and recreational marijuana dispensary?
That's a great question. I would probably say
Yeah.
yes.
Typically, states see grandfather clauses, and that
Yeah.
medical marijuana dispensaries would be grandfathered into selling recreational. They would still keep the same patient base, but allow a wider variety of population to come in and use their
Right.
store. The medical and recreational cannabis would be separated. So in stores in Colorado, you have a medical side that has a glass case. It's got all your medical products,
Right.
and then you have a recreational side that has all your recreational products.
Interesting. All right. Want to take another break, and we'll continue with Mike Derby and Kittrick Jefferies in just a moment. A little bit earlier, we were talking about some cities and communities, towns around South Dakota wanting to possibly own and operate their own dispensary, something Mike Derby is against. What about local control? What about how many dispensaries can be in a community and the local control versus state control?
Yeah, so the way that we read the rule is local control for counties and municipalities all over the state would be able to decide on the time, place, manner, and the number of licenses. So one of the things that was written out in IM 26 was if there was a numerical cap on the amount of licenses, then those applications if there were more applicants than the cap allowed, they would go to the department for evaluation in a graded scale, right? And then that graded scale would determine a lottery type system on if you get your application or not. So what happens when a municipality or county caps the number of licenses available in their jurisdiction? Let's look to North Dakota. They capped it at 8. They said, we're going to try and make as much money on this as possible, and we're going to put our licensing fees at $110,000. And what ended up happening was a company called Grassroots went in and purchased several of those licenses. Well, when they purchased those licenses, and granted North Dakota is very similar to South Dakota in that we're not a huge population base, they ended up turning a profit and selling them for, on average, in the whole package deal, it ended up being $27 million a dispensary within that package deal to Cura, which is the largest cannabis company in the country, if not the world.
Where was this company based? Were they a North Dakota company?
No, they were based out of Chicago.
Now, will there be favoritism shown toward a South Dakota company, like you were talking about mom and pop dispensaries, so to speak? Favoritism shown toward South Dakota companies that want to have a dispensary versus a larger corporation, maybe from Chicago?
In the rules it does state that the local municipality would be able to decide their most apt choice on who they decide or who they would want to have the dispensary. And that goes into the graded application scale. But if you have a graded application and there's somebody with $200 million at a loss leader marketing style, just holding on to their medical dispensary, kind of waiting for recreational to come around, I guess it would be, well, would that person who may lose money on this, or the person that is going to have enough capital to hold on to that license and weather the storm until they can start gaining money from it? But at the end of the day, I would hate to see any of the revenue generated leave this state. We want to build our infrastructure up. We want to buy South Dakota cars and homes, and make it so that we have good roads to drive on. So,
right. Are there any issues with interstate commerce that go along with recreational or medical marijuana?
Yes, there is, and I'm not naive to the fact that I'm a free market person. I believe in private enterprise. I'm just trying to give South Dakotans first bite of the apple. In my legislation on the adult use retail side, the applicant had to be a South Dakotan, and a majority of their stock in their company had to be owned by South Dakotans. And I know there's many ways to get around that. I get it. But I was just trying to create a way where we could get first bite at the apple. Now when it's legalized federally, those little caveats will go by the wayside because interstate commerce laws would not allow you to do that. They wouldn't allow us to prohibit somebody from out of state coming in and doing business in the state of South Dakota. I get it. Just trying to, if there's a window there, I'm just trying to create a window.
Now, it's interesting about business, but what about a patient? Can a patient from Nebraska come into South Dakota when we get dispensaries here and pick up medical marijuana, then go back to Nebraska?
if only Nebraska had medical marijuana. But yes, they would be able to.
They
South
can.
Dakota
You can
does
go
allow
state to state.
reciprocity for other patients to come in and purchase cannabis at our dispensary. It's a non-resident card holder.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So even though their state doesn't have it, it doesn't mean they're shut out of getting...
You would have to have a card in that jurisdiction.
Right.
So you would have to have a medical marijuana card in the jurisdiction, the state you live in, and use that card to come in and get a non-resident card here that would allow you to purchase
So
cannabis.
in the end, it'll be accepted.
Yep.
With a non-resident card.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Where are we right now? Let's recap all this for anybody who's joining late. We're waiting for the state Supreme Court to make a ruling on Amendment A, recreational marijuana. We think the earliest it can be is Thursday the 1st, when it should have gone into effect if it wasn't struck down in Hughes County. But the Supreme Court may take its sweet time in making a ruling. They're really in no rush. Let's just play the what ifs. If it is struck down, the next step would be, if it's upheld, I should say, and Amendment A is continued to be struck down.
I'm glad you clarified that, because
Yes.
that's where it gets confusing.
Right.
Upholding the circuit court means it's unconstitutional.
Right. It doesn't mean the fight is over.
Right. That's where I think you trigger the proponents to get a ballot initiative put together. Probably an initiated measure, my guess, rather than a constitutional amendment. Although they will have that pretty fine-tuned now, because they'll know what the South Dakota Supreme Court does not like about the current amendment. So they could fine-tune it. I would prefer an initiated measure. Changing the Constitution is a big deal. That was originally why I voted no. It's just, I thought it went too far. So that's one path. Then, if there's the will of the legislature, there's going to have to be some people that change their minds for the legislature to put forth legislation that would be maybe an Amendment A type style bill with some changes, and put that forth to the legislature. And if that passed, and the governor signed it, then they could pull it off the ballot. So that's two paths that we talked about earlier.
Now, if Amendment A is found to be constitutional, do we go back on schedule for legalizing marijuana, or do the opponents of Amendment A have more legal recourse? Could they take it to a higher court out of the state?
That's always a possibility. I guess you could take it to the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't know if there's the appetite to do that. That's, once again, now you've got the Supreme Court.
I mean, there's so many states that already that have it. I think it would be a tough fight myself.
Yes, I do. I don't think it would go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's just work it out. Let's get the rules promulgated. Let's get it going. Let's get it implemented. Let's create a safe product. Let's figure out how to distribute it, what the retail network is. Let's get moving and let's get it done.
You think eventually the will of the voters will stand one form or another, one way or the other?
Yes, I think if it's on the ballot next year in November, it'll be a higher approval vote. They're tired of waiting, and and so it's time to perform, and let's get this thing done.
And there's a lot of money to be made.
There is.
Nobody, people are okay with that.
But it is a kick and talk to it. This business is not for the faint of heart. I toured a medical grow house in Minnesota, and Minnesota put rules in place that said that medical dispensaries could not sell raw flower, the raw product, marijuana. It had to be in capsules or gels or vapes, and that all creates a whole nother level of production costs. They actually lost millions of dollars over a 7-year period serving the medical dispensaries and the medical marijuana community. What were they waiting for? Now they're trying to get state law changed to allow adult use, recreational sales. So this business is not for the faint of heart.
It's interesting talking about the cost of production, which also can then get passed on to the consumer, and usually does. How much does medical marijuana cost versus regular prescription pills that we might get?
Typically significantly cheaper. You have a pharmaceutical industry that's been pretty known for jacking up the prices of pharmaceuticals. And since if your state allows a socially equitable program, it's going to end up having to compete with the black market on pricing anyway. So if your pricing at the store is twice or 3 times more expensive than the guy who's meeting you at the Walmart parking lot, then it kind of depends on where that patient may decide to go. So at the end of the day, we're trying to lower the prices of cannabis to compete with the black market, to bring those taxes and that revenue back up to normal infrastructure, and hopefully be able to build this industry from the ground up. And that's really what we're doing.
Does insurance? No, go ahead.
We were going to talk about insurance.
I was going to talk.
Okay,
I do want to know, will insurance cover medical marijuana in whatever form?
Once it's legal federally.
Yeah.
That's the problem in Minnesota, is the average person spends between $200 and $300 a month on medical marijuana, out-of-pocket cash, no insurance. And so there's a cap on what people are going to be willing to spend out of pocket. Right. And until it's legal federally, I don't think insurance companies are going to play in that game.
Not having it legal federally has kind of created an undue burden on stakeholders and patients alike, whether it's insurance or taxes. When a cannabis business goes to pay taxes, they're still paying federal tax. But unfortunately, since it's a Schedule I substance, cannabis businesses aren't allowed to deduct cost of goods. So a normal business that makes, let's say, $1 million, if they have $500,000 in labor and lease agreements and other things, they would only be taxed on the remaining $500,000 because they'd be able to deduct their cost of goods. Cannabis is taxed at the gross million. So it makes it absolutely impossible. It's not like Pablo Escobar money that people really think about.
Intentionally being put through extra hoops.
Yeah, and it's quite the burden, that's for sure.
Is anybody accepting insurance? Any of the states? Was Oregon accepting insurance?
There are some select companies that are doing insurance and banking. I know that we passed a banking bill this legislative session, not me personally, but the Banking Association passed it, that allows banks to allow hemp and cannabis businesses. But There's also that piece where banks are backed by the federal government. They're federally insured. So it makes it difficult for me to go to Wells Fargo or Chase Bank and be able to bank. So,
And as we start seeing medical dispensaries popping up, when do you think that might be, first of all?
I would suspect that would be around April of 2022. You might see the build-outs happening and the signs
Right.
going up, but I wouldn't expect cannabis businesses to start selling product until April of 2022.
And is a community better off with more dispensaries or fewer? Because I would think more, it takes the prices would come down.
Give you an example of Rapid City's got 47 packaged liquor licenses. They capped it at the amount based on population. If you want to go buy a liquor license today, it's upwards of $300,000, although in statute it was like $5,000. So they capped that license, then it increased the valuation of it, right? So do we keep licenses open, allow the free market to kind of run its course? So that way somebody who is going to sell that license doesn't hold on to those licenses, buy 10, 20 of them at a time, and then just end up selling them at profit on just the license itself. How do we go about that, and how do we stop that? That's what a lot of city councils and county commissioners are talking about to try and make things work.
All right, Kitrick Jefferies from the Dakota Cannabis Consulting Company. He's the owner. Mike Derby, State Representative of Rapid City District 34. Thank you both for being with us. And when the Supreme Court figures out what they want to do, maybe they already haven't, we just don't know yet. But whenever that decision comes down, I hope maybe we can do this again and work with less speculation. All right. Thank you both very much
Thanks
for being
for
with
having
us. We thank you for joining us for this edition about conversations about cannabis. I'm Eric Green. For all of us here at Connect Center 1 and News Center 1, have a terrific rest of your day. It's been a pleasure.